often be disagreed on. Many people believe that it is a form of cruel and unusual punishment, but at the same time others believe that it is the answer to deterring crimes for the future. I don't believe that every criminal of any kind deserves the capital punishment, but I think convicted murderers and killers that prove that they will never change, I think they do. Although capital punishment can't undo anything, it can hopefully deter crimes in the future and protect society. I support the death penalty for these four main reasons. Life in jail can sometimes be ineffective. It gives society the satisfaction that justice was served. It gives sympathy to victims rather than the criminals. And it leaves law-abiding citizens to pay for taxes when they are being in prison. It has been proven over and over again that criminals released from prison will get out and do the exact same thing. And that's why I think that sometimes life in jail can be ineffective. Life in prison is not usually just that. Usually they'll be released on parole, and although prison time might be the longest form of punishment, compared to the death procedure, it takes about 8 seconds for your heart to stop breathing. But when you compare that to what the victims went through, the criminal's pain is still pretty small. It is said that people fear nothing more than death itself. So if that's the case, hopefully in the future it will deter crimes when people know that more and more people will be getting the death penalty for what they've done. As I said before, people will be released and commit again, but even worse, inmates will kill other inmates while being in prison, or even officers on duty. And in this case, the death penalty would be the better option, and more people would be satisfied knowing that this person would never harm anyone ever again. This idea leads me into the case of Kenneth Allen McDuff. He was 19 years old, and he was convicted of theft and burglary and was sentenced to 52 years in prison. He was released just 4 short years after on parole, and when he turned 20, a year later, he was convicted of his first killings, and there was 2 boys and 1 girl. He was sentenced to death, but then later on, he offered $10,000 for parole, and he was appointed a new lawyer and was released 13 years later. 3 years after that, he was convicted of several more murders, and then he was sentenced to death in 1998. This example proves that the death penalty would have been the better option, because 3 to 6 lives would be saved today if he would have had the death penalty 30 years prior like he was supposed to. This example leads me into my next idea, that the death penalty would give sympathy to the victims more so than the criminals. It is often, in a lot of cases, criminals' rights seem to be more protected than the victims. The victims didn't deserve to die that way, but they had no rights at the time, and so I don't know what makes the criminals' rights so important. Another thing that you have to remember is criminals who are receiving the death penalty have been in a lot of trouble before. They're not first-time offenders. They obviously have a long criminal history, and they have proven to society over and over again that they are harmful. By having the death penalty, I think the families would receive closure as well as the community as a whole. In a recent poll, 69% of Americans voted for the death penalty, and I think each person who is done wrong should receive the same, and the wrongdoer should pay the equivalent price for what they have done. In some cases, it almost seems that the justice system is holding the criminal's life on a pedestal by taking so much time and effort into worrying about the future of the criminal, but what about the victims? They didn't have that choice. And it's not like a criminal is an innocent victim fighting for its life. It is, they made that decision and they have to pay the price. If they didn't make that decision, they wouldn't be put in the situation. That makes law-abiding citizens have to pay for their prices to support them. Why should we have to pay to incarcerate them and feed them and clothe them when they have absolutely no value for human life whatsoever? Obviously, the older they get, the more expensive their health care will be, and it is estimated that over $2 million are spent a year just on health care for inmates. All health care equipment, staff, hospitals, all of that is paid out of taxes, and they did this themselves, so why are we paying for their actions? In conclusion, I think the death penalty is a just punishment for those who have been convicted over and over again and have proven to society that they can't be trusted. And also for these 4 reasons. Life in prison can sometimes be ineffective. It gives society satisfaction that justice was served. It gives sympathy to the victim more so than the criminal. And imprisonment leaves law-abiding citizens to pay taxes to support them. Although these are only a few ideas that support the death penalty, I believe for a safer community, this is a form of punishment for convicted murderers. No one wants someone living next door to be a killer, and I think that if the crime was fitted to capital punishment, it was a well thought through decision and the right decision.